Morning everybody, welcome back to Indycar on Thursday morning. My name is Gordon Ross. Today I'm in Partick and a number of new pieces of information to pass along to you which you may not have heard on the mainstream news this morning. And the first one is the fact that British car manufacturing has slumped by 18% in the last quarter. It seems that figures from Jaguar Land Rover are showing that there's been an 18% slump in the sales of new cars in the UK. Corresponding with that is also another slump of 12% in sales of cars outside of the UK. In other words, exporting cars from the United Kingdom has fallen by 12% in the last quarter. The reasons for this, given by the car manufacturers, are that there's been a slump due to the fact that diesel cars are less popular. There's been a collapse in the market for diesel cars in the UK because the British government has announced that there will be a freeze, or be an end to diesel cars being sold in the United Kingdom at some point in the 2030s. However, I don't think that accounts for the sudden dropping off a cliff that we've seen of British manufactured cars in the last few months. I think it's more indicative of the increasing costs of imported materials, raw materials and components from the supply chain in Europe into the UK factories. And also the fact that I think that United Kingdom motorists are now tightening their belts. The days of buying massive SUVs and Range Rovers, I think, are drawing to a close. And so Jaguar Land Rover are probably going to have to reposition themselves at a different point in the market. Conversely, on the other side of the coin, fashion retailers who sell online, like Boohoo, Pretty Little Things, companies like that, have reported that they are now switching their manufacturing from almost 100% overseas in Southeast Asia to 50% manufacturing in the UK. Now, this is another response to the fact that companies which import goods from outside of the UK know that their costs are going to rise soon. And also these online retailers rely on moving quickly to respond to new fashion trends. So they might buy a small order of British manufactured clothes which they know have sold recently because of their advertising and their revenue streams, and so they reorder small quantities or small scale orders rather than mass manufactured huge amounts of clothing coming in from places in the Middle East or Southeast Asia. They're now responding quickly to market trends here in the UK by getting local manufacturers to make small batches of popular lines. Now, in a way, this is a good thing for the UK because it's beginning to respond to the fact that it is soon going to be isolated. And this is the first sign I've seen anyway of British manufacturers beginning to see what is about to happen and preparing themselves for it, shifting their manufacturing base back to places like the north of England, like Manchester, which was traditionally the centre of the rag trade in the UK. It's where many garments were made for customers all over the United Kingdom in the old days. So in a way, this is a good thing, but on the other hand, it is also indicative of the panicky response of British businesses. They know things are about to change and they're trying to future-proof their businesses because they know Brexit is coming. So things are about to get worse. The British car industry, I think, is going to struggle greatly over the next few years, especially the companies which have inwardly invested here that are not indigenous. We already have, pardon me, we have manufacturers such as Vauxhall, we have we have Jaguar Land Rover, we also have Bentley and Rolls-Royce. But other car manufacturers have fallen by the wayside, and the rest of the manufacturing in the UK is done by the likes of Nissan and Toyota, and sometimes Honda. And these companies are primarily based in parts of the northeast of England. And if they're unable to manufacture and supply the European market without tariffs, they will probably close down and move. And this might redress the balance a little bit in UK car manufacturing, but it means the jobs will migrate away from the northeast of England. and into the centres where we already have manufacturing. But in any case, whatever happens with Brexit, the British car manufacturing industry is going to shrink rapidly. I don't mean the car manufacturing industry that is primarily of British origin. I mean the car manufacturing industry in general, including all the companies which have come in from Japan and other places to manufacture here. They will probably leave, and that will just leave the so-called British companies. Now, don't be fooled when I say British companies. Somebody might be saying, well, what about the Mini? That's a great British icon, but the Mini is German. It's a copy of the Mini. It's manufactured by BMW in Germany. It was styled in Italy and has no connection with the UK other than its original heritage from the original Mini back in the 60s, which was, of course, designed and built here. So don't be fooled by these Union Jacks that you see all over the Mini. These are just simply a selling point, nothing more. There's nothing British in the Mini these days. Speaking of British, reminds me that I owe an apology to Wales from yesterday's programme, where I stated that Wales was not a country but it was a principality of England. Now, I am quite happy to say I was wrong here, because in 1320, I think, or way back in the 1300s, Wales was conquered by England at that time. But in recent years, and since devolution, Wales is recognised again as one of the 4 nations of the United Kingdom, has of course got its own parliament in Cardiff, in much the same way as we have one in Holyrood and the Northern Irish have one at Stormont. So I apologise to Wales for dissing you yesterday, right? I apologise for that. You are of course a nation. However, it mystifies me as to why you still trust the Labour Party with your politics and with the safety and security of your laws. The Labour Party, of course, as we know, caved in to the Tories the other day there and accepted that they would allow the Tory government for 5 years to hold on to the powers returning from Brussels. Now, I think this is a sign that the Labour Party is cozying up to the Tories as usual in Westminster, and is not really interested in opposing them in any way, shape or form. The Labour Party has difficulty at the moment in positioning itself in British politics because it is having to accept Brexit, and it's having to embrace this, it's having to grasp this thistle and pretend that it's in favour of it. And in so doing, it has to go along with Tory plans to hang on to these powers. Not so in Scotland. Scotland is far more determined to protect its powers and to prevent the British government from grabbing back these powers and using them against us, because we have far more to lose than Wales does, unfortunately. We have fracking to worry about. We also have things like nuclear weapons on our soil. We have the problems of the oil industry as well, which is basically ours to lose as well. There are so many different things in Scotland that we have to lose if we allow these powers to be repatriated to Westminster. They will end up in the hands of David Mundell and his new Scotland office. And he'll use those and abuse those powers, and he'll water them down to get fracking started in Scotland. He'll reduce all of the rules governing food imports so that we can do a tacky trade deal with America. He will water down the rules regarding the origin of Scottish produce so that he can sell the rights to manufacture our stuff overseas. Mundell will use these powers against Scotland in order to help England with its Brexit plans, and we cannot allow that to happen. Scotland has so much more to lose. We're the only nation in the whole of the UK which runs at a profit. And we want to stay that way because our independence depends on us running at a profit. That's how we are going to survive. Whether we have oil or not is immaterial. We can survive quite happily at the moment with no oil whatsoever, just from our balance of payments. Our trading surplus is sufficient for Scotland to continue to survive by itself, completely independently of the other 4 nations. So that was my message for today, is the fact that we are now seeing evidence of Brexit damage to British industries before we've even Brexited. The car industry is beginning to contract. Which one will be next? Well, we don't really know, but what we do know is that export industries will be the first thing to be hit. This morning, before I came out, actually, I was reading the news and watching the news about the issue of Gibraltar, the British military base on a piece of rock sticking out of the south part of Spain. Now, the big issue there is the fact that people who live on the rock on Gibraltar do not want to leave the European Union. They voted 95% to stay in and are being forced, like Scotland, to exit, to leave the EU, which means that there will have to be customs posts at the main entrance to the island, which is basically a causeway between mainland Spain and the rock. Spain is also demanding that it has at least shared control over the airport, which shares some of its land mass. Some of the land which is used for the airport is actually on Spanish soil. And so there's a terrible struggle going on between the Spanish government and the British government over who controls which parts of Gibraltar. And this is another one of these circles which cannot be squared. Another relic of British occupation of other people's countries, which still hangs on into the 21st century and is another stumbling block to the whole Brexit plan. Much like Northern Ireland is a stumbling block, so is Gibraltar. Which brings me back to Northern Ireland. It was quoted, I think, in the Telegraph this week that the DUP's leader is warning the Tories that if they water down Brexit in any way, that they will completely scupper the government. They will bring down the Tory government. The DUP is in a strange situation in Northern Ireland, I think, because Northern Ireland voted to remain in Europe, but it has a party in power which has stated quite publicly that it wants to leave Europe, but it wants to leave Europe without any borders between the north and the south. Again, a circle that cannot be squared, and the DUP threatening the Tories that if they don't get this full hard Brexit that they demand with this frictionless border, they're going to bring down the Tory government. The whole thing is a house of cards built on sand at the moment, and the sand is shaking under an earthquake. The whole Brexit edifice is so unstable that God knows what will happen next. But one thing is certain, and that is that the Scottish Government is not going to give up its powers to Westminster. It's already refused to sign any agreement which signs over those powers to Westminster for 7 years. Now, ask yourself this: why did Wales get a deal for 5 years? A sunset clause which gives them their powers back after 5 years. But in Scotland we have to wait 7. Why would that be different from Wales to Scotland? You can see that the British government is actually cherry-picking things. It's deciding how long it will take to use those powers against Scotland after Brexit, how long it will take for them to break the Scottish Parliament and demolish it and close it down and give all the powers to David Mundell in the Scotland office. The British government has calculated this very carefully. They know exactly how long it will take them to get control of Scottish politics and to sideline the Scottish Parliament completely and basically make the SNP and everybody else in Holyrood irrelevant to the politics of the nation. Nothing, as somebody once said, that happens in politics happens accidentally. It happens because it's been planned that way. We also know that the silence that's going on at the moment in the SNP is also planned. There's a reason why we're not hearing anything at the moment. That's frustrating for all of us. We want them to stand up and say, stop it, we're not going to put up with it, we're going to have a referendum right now. But there's a reason why it's not happening right now. Things will be ready for the referendum, but they can't be ready yet, otherwise we would be hearing a date. So we just need to keep waiting a bit longer. The fact that British manufacturing is starting to hurt, 18% is a huge drop in production for a car manufacturer, by the way. That's gigantic. I mean, that's almost a fifth of their production has been cut. Jaguar Land Rover is shedding 1,000 jobs just because of this one drop in production. And to see themselves through the Brexit chaos that's coming, they might end up going on to short-term working, because unless they can increase their export orders or their domestic sales, then they're in big trouble. Because remember that domestic sales keep car companies afloat as well. They sell cars all over the UK. But if you look around you, and I see this every day, all you see around you at the moment, every single day of the week, is more and more Range Rovers everywhere you go. These mid-range SUV type vehicles that Land Rover make here are all over the place. Everybody's got one. And eventually the market gets saturated. But remember, people are now pulling in the reins. They're seeing Brexit's coming. They don't know what's going to happen to their jobs. They're going to stop spending. That means they're going to stop buying new cars when they don't need them. They're going to stop buying new white goods when they don't need them. They're going to stop all of these discretionary purchases that we do, like sofas, like TV sets, washing machines. We can make do and mend for a few more years through Brexit. And this is the effect that Brexit will have on the UK market. And the internal economy will depress, because people start to see their jobs at risk. They start to see prices rising. The goods that they're buying in the shops are starting to increase in price. Okay, enough waffle, but the point I'm trying to make today is that the effects of Brexit are being felt already. British industries are positioning themselves, battening down the hatches and trying to get ready for whatever Brexit we end up with. But it looks to me as if companies are hedging their bets between manufacturing in the UK and manufacturing abroad. They're balanced on a knife edge at the moment, and they're waiting to see which way Brexit goes. So it's all a waiting game just now. But there's a 50% chance that Brexit will go very badly indeed, and there's a 50% chance that it will just go badly. But there's no good side to Brexit. There's no upside to it. What will happen in Ireland, nobody knows. But whatever happens in Northern Ireland, it's not going to be what the majority of people in Northern Ireland voted for. They're going to get Brexited against their will, in the same way that Scotland's going to get Brexited against our will. But we have the advantage, at least, of having elected a government for Scotland that we support in majority. In Northern Ireland, they've got the DUP representing them. Now, I don't know how they managed to get themselves a majority, but they support Brexit against the people's wishes in Ireland. The whole of the Irish situation seems to me a complete contradiction in terms. The same with Gibraltar. Both of these situations, manufactured by the British state over hundreds of years, could easily have been resolved decades ago had they peacefully and in an orderly fashion given back these territories to the countries which originally owned them, and maybe agreed just to live there or lease land there or to come to some other arrangement. But they never did it. And so they're now faced with these intractable problems, which Brexit is going to destroy all types of things in Northern Ireland. It's going to completely wreck their way of life. It's probably going to wreck their economy. It's probably going to ruin their exports across the border into and out of the Republic. In terms of Gibraltar, they're not going to be able to fly their planes in and out. How are they going to supply Gibraltar after Brexit? We're going to have to go back to the days when Gibraltar was an island where they could only supply it by sea and air, and where people who wanted to go into Spain would have to go through a checkpoint, show their passports, have a visa to go and visit friends, get their cars searched to and from, going from one part of from Spain and into Gibraltar. It's a mess. The whole thing is a complete and utter mess, and nobody cares. Nobody in the British government cares. The Labour Party doesn't seem to care. They're just going along with whatever the Tories do. Anyway, that's the news for today. But basically, prepare yourselves for the worst. British industries are already starting to batten down the hatches, and the first evidence of that has appeared today. Anyway, I'll see you later, and once again, Wales, I'm sorry for saying that you're not a nation. Obviously, you are a nation, and history has moved on. So, I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye for now.